Very good morning to everybody. Welcome to the second in the series of Leading Through the Revival. Today we've got three really inspirational hoteliers here, all with UK properties and non-UK properties. We have Greg Hegarty, CEO of PPHE. We have Ronny Maier from Marriott and David Taylor, COO of the Law Group. But before we start, I'm just going to do a little bit of a plug for the next Leading Through the Revival event. So dates for your diary, please. On the 23rd of June at 11 o'clock, we have Kate Nichols booked. Everybody knows Kate from UK Hospitality, and the aim of the next Kate Nichols webinar is to talk through what should by then be the latest government guidelines on reopening. On the 2nd of July at 11 AM, we have Dr. Hilary Cook, who's doing a session called Picking Up the Pieces. And this is really a very practical session for you and your leadership teams. It's a guide for hospitality leaders in these really challenging times. Whilst I'm talking about Dr. Hilary Cook, I'd like to just give a little plug and a little thank you to Dr. Hilary Cook, Ewan Thomas, Adam Hersey, and 37 of the MILD aspiring leaders who have raised over £10,000 for the Hospitality Action 20,000 miles. Between the 37 of them, they did 2,400 miles and raised over £10,000. There is a question and answer button on the bottom of your panel. So whilst you're listening to the three presentations we've got, we will spend a lot of quality time at the end with questions that will come directly from you. So please, any questions you have, put through the Q&A function at the bottom. So I'm delighted to welcome Greg Hegarty, CEO of PPHE. Greg, over to you.
Thank you, Danny. I'll start sharing. Let's get into presentation mode. Okay, good morning all. I hope you're all keeping well under these difficult times. Again, thank you, Danny, for allowing me to share our strategic approach to the COVID situation at the PPHE Hotel Group. 2 seconds, I just quickly wanted to show you who we are, for those of you who don't know who we are. The PPHE Hotel Group owns, operates and franchises the Park Plaza brand from Radisson. Park Plaza is an upper upscale asset class property. We operate Art Hotel, which is upper upscale asset class lifestyle brand. And we also own Arena Hospitality and Campsite in Croatia. So we have a European geographical exposure of UK, Holland, Germany, Netherlands, and Hungary and Croatia. We've got 8,800 rooms in operation. Our asset portfolio prior to COVID-19 was 1.7 billion, and we typically turn over about 357 million a year. Now, our European businesses were predominantly impacted a lot sooner than March 23rd in the UK. We started feeling this really in February in Croatia, and then we saw it happening in Germany, then into Holland, and then into the UK. So by the time we got to March 23rd, we knew what was going to happen in the UK. We decided to take control of it a lot sooner, as we could see the reactions which we were seeing in other countries. So moving on, we did remain open. I'm very proud to say, and the team at Park Plaza, Westminster Village, were able to support essential workers, which included NHS, government and MPs. As you can imagine with this, we had to adapt our operations rapidly to cope with the demand of essential workers and team members to make sure they all remain safe. We had significant learnings along this process, dealing with NHS virologists, environmental specialists. We also needed to ensure that the well-being of our team members, as well as the NHS and all of the government workers, was our #1 priority. And whilst this was going on, we were also able to implement new technologies and trial them of what we were seeing, which helped shape our strategy. as we went through this process. So with that in mind, one thing we absolutely knew, clearly when all of this started, as a company, we knew we needed to take immediate action, as the day-to-day life of everybody was going to be very different, of us, our team members, and guest expectations. So with that in mind, we engaged and reopened a project implementation team looking at 4 predominantly areas: new guest expectations, new regulations and government guidelines, new industry trends and standards, and new team member expectations. Now, everybody in our company formed part of this group. That project team was compiled of specialists, general managers in their own niche field, be it F&B, spa, maintenance, meeting and events. Also, all of the route team members, absolutely from kitchen porters to waiters to everybody was part of our chain of communication in developing our plan here. And most importantly, customers and what customers were wanting. We got that project team together. We got the communication strategy going. We were very much dealing with weekly calls, team calls, which we've all been dealing with. And following all of these calls and communications, we got great engagement across the business, every single department from IT, purchasing, to brand, to finance. And that allowed us to carry on implementing our strategy over the last 3 months. So with that in mind, we created brand standards, which I'm going to show you in a moment. We had phasing document which opening hotels, which very much correlates with what UK hospitality have done, and a hotel opening checklist by department. One thing Plaza are good at is opening hotels. So one thing we did take a lot of knowledge of is how can we adapt that opening plan for COVID-19. But one thing is for sure, we have and we are at one clear, simply formatted communication strategy for all of our hotels and our customers. So when I talk about a phased approach, and you would have seen this, and I think it's very typical of what you are, you know, at the moment with Westminster Bridge opening, we are not opening a full service hotel in stage 1. So come July, Westminster Bridge will be our predominantly hotel which is open. That is basically offering a select service product in the reopening of phase 1. And that's very much rooms front of house, breakfast grab and go, very limited room service offering, and takeaway in coffee shops, etc. Now, please be assured that this doesn't link to the government R ratios at all. This is very much what we have seen of what guests are expecting and what actually the guests are wanting. They don't want that high level of engagement yet. I feel consumer confidence needs to re-engage. Government guidelines need to be more clear of how much and when we can open. But we are prepared for it. So we do have the 3 phases, 1, 2, and 3. Phase 2, one thing which we have been able to do with the NHS and the virologists have looked into this, we can serve buffet breakfast, but the buffet breakfast need to be served by team members. We will be enhancing our restaurant capacity. And one thing I want to say, and I'll talk a bit about more, we have to be very creative about our restaurants and social distancing, etc. But I'll come to that as we go through the process. And then in phase 3, that's when things are getting to some degree of normality. The hotels are opening and they're starting to see the company full brand standards all opening, and we're getting back off on our feet again. So what does our hotels look like? We have 4 prototypes really currently in operation. We've got the campsites in Croatia, we've got Victoria, Amsterdam in the Netherlands, we've got Berlin Mitte in Berlin, and obviously Westminster Bridge. Now, what was coming evident out of all of our research and all of our detailing with the NHS virologists and speaking to our customers is that we needed to see a lot of these guys going around our hotel looking like Ghostbusters, okay? Now, these are obviously sanitizing packs, and they're going around the hotel being very proactive and very visual. That's what our customers wanted to see. We had the creation of reopening checklists, specialist cleaning procedures introduced, and I've talked about the weekly comms. But all in all out of this, what did we create? What we did create is an employee in a customer brand called Reassuring Moments. It is a united, proactive approach to ensure that we make the best operational and commercial adaptations. We aim not only to adhere to new regulations and expectations from our customers, but to use it as an opportunity to enhance our guest experience. So out of all of this project work, we now have our internal brand, which we now communicate internally for our team members, because there's no difference between all of the measures we're putting in for our guests and for what we're putting in for our team members. It all still applies. So Reassuring Moments has been created. What that encapsulates is enhanced cleanliness. That is absolutely paramount, and I'm sure you all know it. Increased cleaning, disinfection of all public areas, new procedures in place in high touch areas. That was evident. People touching phones, remote controls, anything like this was obviously a concern for everyone, and including the NHS. And as you've seen here on the left, this is some of our training materials, because we have had to absolutely retrain our room attendants of how they approach a room clean, time it, motion study it, and then actually communicate how it looks like. Now, we've removed all unnecessary collateral. We've put the signage in a room which supports this, but it's very, very much a very, very deep, sanitized clean of a room. And when you do the time and motion studies for your own properties, you will see that that's got quite a considerable cost impact, which we all need to be aware of. Heightened guest safety and comfort. As you can see here on the left, again, more imagery around social distancing. And as I've seen from Europe, you know, Europe is 1.5 meters. We're at 2 meters. We've heard about 1 meter. You know, 1.5 meter in Europe is working for us at the moment, you know, but obviously we'll have to see what comes in the future regarding social distancing. However, we're prepared for it in either way. But what we did want to see, and our customers wanted to see this seal. They wanted to see the seal of cleanliness. So when we've touched and looked at these high touch items, like what you can see here on the left is a wardrobe. You know, we've decluttered our wardrobe. It only, you know, we've taken coat hangers. We've got limited number of coat hangers in there now. We've actually tried to limit as much as we can what guests would touch, but still need to use. So all of this is sealed. The telephones are covered. Remote controls are dealt with. We've been looking at all of the social distancing, what I've already talked about within restaurants and bars and dealing with capacity. We've installed all the protective screens, and you will see a video at the end of how we've done this. We've worked alongside SGS, which is a world-leading inspection, verification, testing and certification company, also Clifton Environmental, also the UK National Health Service and NHS, which has helped us create our risk assessments, because as we know, the government issue on risk assessments is being quite, you know, staggered and it's emerging. So what we've done is try to take as much control of this as we possibly can, using your authorities where we can, and obviously looking at the document from the UK Hospitality as well as what they're supporting government with. So yeah, heightened guest safety and comfort. We've all heard the joke, you know, on WhatsApp. Who has influenced the guest technology or the guest company strategy for IT in the last 3 months? Was it your chief executive? Was it your CFO? Or was it COVID-19? It was 100% COVID-19 for our company. We have invested 1.3 million in technology in the last 3 months. We've created this Reassuring Moments app. The customer will get that prior to check-in or an opportunity to have it. It will allow a customer to check in online, allow a customer to use their phone to enter their room. It'll allow a customer to communicate with our WhatsApp communication to our team members rather than having all of that integration and touch points. It'll allow a customer to take pictures of a QR code in a restaurant and order food directly from their mobile device. And I think most importantly, they can change the channel of their TV on it. So that's all being implemented. Technology has been huge for us through this whole process, just so we can, we had the system downtime to do it. So we've implemented as much as we can there to make ourselves ready. The biggest question I'm always getting is around thermal technology. We have it in place at Westminster Bridge. The guests like it, feel reassured by it, but as we know, legislation is loose around it. I feel if you haven't got house rules, or what you're going to do if somebody is over that temperature, you know, it is going to create a potential issue. So we are hoping that more legislation comes out about this, or you do have to implement those house rules at the time of booking. But what it does do is make people think, and where we've seen a real benefit is employees, because, you know, we are going to measure the temperature of team members. And I think it puts team members coming into work and gives them that guest reassurance, knowing that our team members have gone through some kind of thermal checking before they can come on into the business. So with that in mind, we've moved also on to revised food and beverage offering. In the first stages, we're very much offering the grab-and-go breakfast, disposable wrap packaging, as you can see here on room service. That is what a room service looks like at Westminster Bridge. That is what the NHS and MPs and all of the essential workers currently have been having in our property at the moment. So these are the stages we've been going through. And if you look to the right there, that is a restaurant at Vondel Park. It's our Tozy, it's a destination restaurant. Vondel Park is in Amsterdam. Amsterdam is able to open restaurants and bars and use of terrace. Now, what I wanted to show you here, that actual terrace is a bedroom suite above the restaurant. We have used every single space we can, because internally you can only have 30 people in one area with social distancing in Amsterdam. We've spread it out. We utilized every area, every inch of garden space, every inch of terrace space to try and get our restaurant and facilities open there. That opens up on the 18th of June, I'm pleased to say. Reservations are good. The whole spirit in Amsterdam is very positive at the moment. And I'm also pleased to say, come Saturday, we opened up our inventory to the Dutch market, and we have 66 rooms sold at the Victoria Amsterdam, which is really, really good news for us. And it's nice to see green shoots coming from there. Also, as part of this process, empowering team members. Obviously, it was important to reconnect with them. We follow all of the advice from government and UK hospitality in our training materials. We've got very interactive training with COVID-19. We're using all of the quick reference cards, learning portals, all of the obvious ones you're doing. But it's really about re-engaging a team, empowering your team members, and making them feel safe when they come into work. And as I said, welcoming back our customers, we have a full communication strategy in place. Now, everything I've talked to you about reassuring moments starts when you make a reservation with Central Reservations. When you ring, it'll tell you about everything we've done from cleanliness. When you book a room, you will receive a video, which I'll show you in a moment. That video will tell you what you are likely to expect on your service journey whilst in the hotel. And it'll show and demonstrate the procedures, what we have done and what we are doing. We've also been doing a lot of pre-marketing now about ready for the return, talking about the reassuring moments upon arrival, and everything down to all of the services we're offering, from express check-in, check-out, self-ordering, you know, WhatsApping, it's all there. So it's all been positive. Now, what are we doing next? I mean, the commercial strategy for our properties in the UK, unfortunately, we haven't got the demand. We're not opening all of our properties at once. You know, we are very much going to channel our inventory on supply and demand. You know, the good news for us is we do have condensed capacity we can deal with and open properties by properties. You know, we have got the teams to do that. We're experienced in opening. But apart from that, we're also continuingly to canvass MPs in our local area. You know, and again, in line with what the UK hospitality document, you know, it's not just operations, it's not just team members, you know, it's also about the financial viability of our properties and all of those facilities regarding financing, governance, loans, you know, covenant testing, everything. So we're still lobbying as much as we can. We'll support UK hospitality and MIA where we can. We've obviously had to restructure our business for a new normal, unfortunately, and we are seeing some green shoots, I'm pleased to say, in both Germany, Netherlands and Croatia, and those markets are giving us hope for the UK too. So with that in mind, please forgive me, the video may be a bit sluggish. I'm going to let you download, we'll share it after this presentation. I'll let you have a look at it if you want to look at it a little bit better. But here's reassuring moments from Park Plaza.
All right, I guess that gets it to me. Good morning, everybody.
Okay, thank you. I'll hand over back to Ronny, I believe, or Danny, over to you. Thanks.
Greg, thank you so much. That was really, really informative. We've got lots of questions coming through, which we'll ask you in a bit. So keep the questions coming. And now Ronny is so keen to impart his information to you. He is absolutely chomping at the bit, as you could probably tell. So Ronny, over to you.
Okay, I guess I'm not sure if I now turn the camera on. First of all, good morning, everybody, and thank you for having me on your panel today. It's super exciting to be with this group today, and I'm actually really honored to be speaking to this panel, because I think the group here really represents the true entrepreneurs of our business. Many of us who work for big chains are often looking with envy at you, how you do your business, and the great energy and entrepreneurship which is there. Very quickly to myself, I am the Area Vice President for the United Kingdom and Ireland for Marriott International, looking after our managed portfolio in the UK and Ireland, encompassing 56 managed properties. We currently employ roughly 6,000 people across our hotels. That's not including franchise. And unfortunately, obviously, also over the last few months, had to close the majority of our operations. So we currently have 6 hotels which are operating, supporting NHS and key workers, as well as supporting other critical workers. The remaining hotels, like many of yours, are closed, and it's really difficult to see. 85% of our staff is on furlough, and we're running our teams with hotels with skeleton teams to make sure that when the time that we can open these hotels again, that we can do this as fast and efficient as possible. I do like to compliment Greg on this fantastic presentation. I think it shows really how much work all of us are doing currently to get our hotels ready for the new normal. And while I sometimes hate that word new normal, and I hope eventually the world will go back to the old normal in many aspects, I think reality is that things have changed dramatically and will change when we open our hotels. And 37 years in the industry, 33 years of that was Marriott. I've spent the last 5 years in the UK and looked for the 4 years of them after our provincial portfolio. So we have a good mix of hotels in the UK, of business hotels as well as leisure hotels, golf and country clubs, and each one of them brings obviously their own challenge. I thought, like, what maybe instead of adding to Greg's presentation, kind of like saying all the stuff we're doing, I think it is very clear the race for the most cleanest and hygienic hotel is on. All companies, including ourselves, are going out with messages and equipment and all the great stuff we are planning to do to gain consumer confidence back. What I thought is, instead of giving you a list of things we are doing now, is talk you a little bit about the situation we are in, and where we seeing the business going to, how we are looking at the reopening situation for the UK, but also how it is currently across our portfolio around the world. I said when we were in our rehearsal call before this meeting, sometimes it's best not to be the first. And I really feel that with the UK maybe being the last of the European countries to open up, that there is not only negative on it, there's also some positives on it, because we have an enormous amount of intelligence and learning from our European, from our Asian, Middle Eastern partners, which we can really add to our own opening guidelines and strategies, and hopefully be ready for it when it is announced at some point, hopefully next week, that we can reopen our hotels early July. I also want to make sure that, that I really bring this across, that at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter if you are running a small independent hotel or if you are as part of a large group. At this point, we are all in the same boat. Our situation is as bleak as everybody else's. We are having to fight for every single penny we find. Our cash registers stand still, like yours, and it is an incredible tough environment. In my 33 years, I certainly, and I'm sure none of you have ever seen anything like that before. When we're looking forward, obviously, there is obviously, we're taking a lot of energy of some of the green shoots Greg was talking about before as well. We see on the European side, but we also very aware that the road of recovery will be a very long one, and it will not be an easy one. And for that, you really need to look at some of the statistics around the world. 74% of the entire world airline schedule is currently is reduced capacity. 74%. That are huge numbers. I saw some numbers that 140,000 flights a week in Europe are currently not happening. And we all heard from the airline industry, they also expect this to be very, very slow, and not something which is going to come from one day to the other. So we are concerned about this, obviously, very much like everybody else. The same way we are obviously concerned about that these way of communications we are all practicing for the last 3 months are going quite well. Zoom meetings with hundreds of people, up to 1,000 and more, will change our world, will change our conference world, will change the way we'll meet and travel, certainly. And some of the research we have been doing ourselves, also together with Accenture and some other groups, suggests that the business travelers will be planning to reduce their travel up to 50% in the coming 12 months. That is a huge number. That's a huge concern, obviously, specifically when we talk about some of our business hotels. On the other side, I think there's these green shoots, as Greg was talking about, pent-up demand of people who want to travel, people who really are keen of getting out and getting to other places, staying in hotels. And leisure travel is certainly something we feel also very, very comfortable, or more comfortable about, that this will pick up much faster than we see. What we have learned also already, and this is maybe something which is interesting for everybody, from the short time we're operating our hotels now back again in Europe, so markets like Germany, Poland, Croatia has been opened, the Netherlands are opening up, that pickup is extremely short, but it is a very, very good pickup. Some of our hotels within a week of operations, especially in the leisure markets, have seen occupancies peaking back to 70% within the first 10 days, which is really much more than we actually thought it would be, but predominantly for leisure. We're going to have to monitor this. We'll see this, how this demand is continue to look like. But these are some green shoots we are really, really excited about, and we'll explore. On the other side, again, and I, for the UK market, know this myself from our provincial markets, we have always been very, very strong on UK versus London and some other markets in the UK, very dependent on the US and Middle Eastern markets. So we would expect that our leisure provincial portfolio is probably recovering much faster than potentially our London portfolio. Similar like Greg, we are spending a lot of time right now in how do we want to open our hotels, and when do we want to open our hotels, and we're discussing this across our managed portfolio and our franchise partners, that is it really sensible to just go out and open every hotel and we cannibalize each other, or should we have a more coordinated approach on that? very clear from a strategic point of view when we look at reopening our hotels. Beside obviously doing the same work as Greg did in terms of the hygiene and the risk assessments and all these pieces. And I must say I'm fairly pleased that the way these guidelines were put together. I think that under the leadership of Kate Nichols and UK Hospitality, working with many of us, I think these guidelines have been put well together. Some may say they should be more clear and more strict. Others might say they are just enough. But I think in generally they really reflect very well what we need to do. But generally, from an opening strategy, our view is that very simple. We will open a hotel when we think that we can stop the bleeding, meaning really coming away from the cost you have today of keeping a hotel closed and reducing this by having it open. There's no point of opening anything up if you're not achieving this. But so this is our three kind of like approach towards stop the bleeding, go back to positive GOP levels, and then obviously making sure that we are returning more again on the profitable side of the business, which again we think will be a very, very long recovery. A couple other things we have been really looking at is like doing a lot of consumer research around Europe, Middle East, also learning from Asia. Asia currently, our hotels in China and neighboring countries are back at occupancies around 40–45%. Our European portfolio is at this point after 2 weeks at 15%. And if we're taking roughly the numbers out of Asia, we'll expect that it's going to be a 2 to 3 months journey to be on the similar trajectory as Asia, running hotels in the mid 40s to early 50s. What is interesting to see from the statistics we hear is that principally 60% of all travelers still consider traveling as long as borders are open and as long as they know there's no quarantine. The UK quarantine program is of great concern, of course, to many of us. There might be some reasons to understand why government took this route, because it seems that the sentiment of the citizens still says we like the idea of having a quarantine, even though it hurts our business. Personally, I hope that by latest end of this month, when the first review is, that this will go at least within Europe, and that we'll be able to welcome customers to the UK and easily leave the UK and come back without having to go on a 2 weeks quarantine. We also have some research on Europeans that 45% of the people in France, Italy, and Germany are planning trips this summer. A lot of them is domestic still, but again, a big group would be also leaving into neighboring countries if it's considered safe. An interesting statistic also we got was that 73% of the UK citizens are planning to travel, and this predominantly within the UK, which I think is very good news for all of us who are in the leisure business and having leisure hotels. So being prepared for that and making sure that we be able to open our hotels together with our leisure facilities, our spas, will be helpful. Those of you who run golf clubs like ourselves know that this has been a tremendous demand right away. And we were very excited to see how fast people wanted to get out back on the courses to play golf. So principally, again, we think it's going to be a slow recovery, but there are green shoots which we are very much looking forward to do. Maybe as a sort of like closing comment from my side is we clearly have the same approach as Greg's group in terms of the new normal, the social distancing and all these pieces. And while in some hotels it's easier because you have the space and you can spread out, some of the smaller hotels will require a lot of creativity. I think we'll be very much looking at the government, how They're going to approach the 2 meter versus 150 or 1 meter distancing approach. But I think we'll be seeing hopefully more ease on these rules in the coming weeks, as long as the infection rates remain normal. Maybe as a last part, and I also agree here with Greg very much, mobile will be a big component, and it's part of our strategy as well. We have, in the meantime, 80% of our hotels equipped on mobile key and mobile technology, which we believe also might be a game changer. But you know, a lot of that is still to be seen. That is pretty much a little bit from the Marriott side where we are at the moment, and I look forward to your questions later on. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ronny. I never thought I'd hear the expression, "We'll open a hotel when we stop the bleeding." I think that's a sign of the times. So our last panelist is David Taylor, who is COO of the Law Group and ex-Hotelier of the Year. So David, over to you.
Thanks, Danny, and thanks to Ronny and Greg for leading the presentations today. Just to sort of re-clarify a couple of points from Danny. So I'm the Chief Operating Officer of the Law Group. We're a privately owned independent hospitality business operating here in Europe and in the US. In London, we own and operate sea containers on the River Thames, and we own the ACE in Shoreditch, which is managed by ACE. In Amsterdam, we own and operate the Hotel Politzer, and we also operate the Kimpton De Witt as a franchise. So some similarities with Greg in terms of our operating locations. In the US, we have 2 properties which we own and operate in Washington, DC. One being the Hotel Riggs, which opened at the end of January. So in fact, the hotel opened, I think, for approximately 6 weeks before it closed. So that's certainly it's a story to talk about ramp up. And the second property we have in Washington, DC is the Carlisle, which was formerly a Kimpton Hotel. And that property is, like all of our properties, closed, but is closed for renovation, and we will reopen in January 2021. For me personally, I joined Law Group on the 1st of May, and I couldn't think of a stranger time to be joining any job, but joining a job in hospitality, where obviously our businesses are just completely decimated by COVID-19. So picking up on the points made by Greg and by Ronny, my thought was just to sort of talk you through almost each of the locations, where we're at in terms of sort of thought process and sort of considerations as to how we think we will reopen the hotels and in what formats. It goes without saying that you know, everything we're doing is underpinned by following good practice. So certainly when we think about the sort of the three different reopening strategies, they are different given the different jurisdictions. But we are thinking through, you know, staff awareness. What do we do when we reopen? Employee safety, and of course, you know, guest awareness, because that's going to be key in giving our guests confidence as and when they come back into our businesses. We're using risk assessments, and UK hospitality, certainly when we look at the UK, as being a sort of good sort of roadmap at meeting the core standards. But equally, we're looking at gold plating in those local jurisdictions as well, to ensure that we not only meet, but we surpass expectations for our employees and also for our guests, of course. So as I get into each of the geographic locations, so if I start with Washington, and I thought I'd probably add in a sort of a little bit of information for you in terms of how we've received government support, because in fact, when you compare and contrast the difference between the US, Europe, in our case, in the case of the Netherlands and the UK, there are quite different sort of methods that the government's applying, which has actually meant that in some cases our approach to reopening, picking up on Ronny's point around you know, only opening the hotel when it financially makes sense, has taken a bit of a twist for us. So in terms of Washington then, so we prior to me joining, but having followed the journey with our GM and the teams there, the hotel opened to great fanfare, multi-million-pound redevelopment of the Riggs Bank, and in doing that, when we reopened, along with our other properties such as the Pulitzer and Sea Containers, a huge amount of time was put into creating a luxury lifestyle hotel with a big focus on food and beverage. So within the 3 to 4 weeks, the hotel opened. It started to get great reviews. Guest sentiment on TripAdvisor and our other dashboards was really, really positive. And since then, the hotel has been featured in Condé Nast as a hot hotel. However, unfortunately, all of the people we hired, with the exception of around 50 people, we had to let go. In the US, the government has issued sort of what they call a care loan. So in essence, that care loan is issued to you. And again, for us, when we're considering reopening, the care loan has what they describe as a forgiveness clause. And that forgiveness clause means that ultimately, if you reopen the hotel and you bring all of, or as many as the employees as you had at the point in which the hotel closed, or just prior to that, then the government then creates a forgiveness element, which in essence means you have to pay back less of the loan. So when we've considered reopening the property, and again, building on all of the points that were made by Ronny and Greg, one consideration for us was that actually where we have our teams who are not working, when the US government is wanting people to reopen and support the wages, and ultimately if we don't reopen, we end up paying more of the loan back to the government. Our view has been that we want to get the hotel reopened as soon as possible. So if I look at the landscape in Washington, DC, the vast majority of our competitors are opening or have opened recently. Our own plans were to start reopen with F&B at the beginning of June, and then the hotel would follow. But given the recent issues which we'll all have seen, and certainly with a lot of looting which has taken place in Washington, our opening date's been put back, and we're now looking to sort of reopen the restaurant towards the middle of this month, and the hotel at the 1st of July. One consideration which we're thinking about in all of our hotels is how we can introduce additional revenues. Everyone on this call will know that food and beverage is really the shop window to our hotels, but it isn't necessarily the most profitable. And we'll have all seen the increased sort of surge in deliveries and takeaways. So we've decided, as a way of trying to reintroduce the hotel, reintroduce our restaurant, we're going to start offering delivery and takeaway at our hotel in Washington. Our biggest challenge there is the fact that having only been open for 5 weeks, and as we know, opening a hotel has a ramp up, which could take anywhere from 6 months to a couple of years to get to a point of sort of some form of stabilization. We need to begin that journey again. So, with the help of the government loan, and also with the view that we do need to get the hotel open. So, to some degree, our financial forecast is impossible to guess, but what we do know is we need to get the hotel reopened. We want to get the teams back in, and that gives us a platform to get the hotel to begin its ramp up journey. Very much as described by Ronny and Greg, we're very much taking a phased approach. I think it's fair to say across the 3 locations we operate in, we're not making any assumptions on any level of events business, conference and events business for the next few months, and we're forecasting some revenue, but very minimal in and around Christmas. So if I take Amsterdam, where we say we operate the 2 properties, a number of restaurants and bars and hotels obviously have reopened. We part own the Soho House in Amsterdam, and that opened at the beginning of July with social distancing. In the case of our 2 properties, we are still in the process of finalising reopening dates, but we would expect to see both hotels reopen within the next sort of 2 to 3 weeks. We are using the opportunity of this lack of demand to also get some renovation done in one of our properties. So also we're going to get that done with the need for us to sort of look at that reopening date. Our challenge in Amsterdam, and again, our challenges differ by locations, but our challenge in Amsterdam is that the majority of our Our guests historically have not necessarily been domestic Dutch guests, but they've been sort of high-end North American guests. So we're having to rethink about how do we completely rebuild our business, given that when we've had some of the sort of highest average rates in the city, it's an easy way to sort of work your way down to the bottom. So between the two properties and with Kimpton DeWitt having IHG's distribution and Pulitzer really acting as an independent, we've got to work out how we can benefit both short, medium and long term from a very different customer profile. And I think we would expect to see not only some sort of Dutch bit sort of business throughout the summer, but it's then looking at sort of near countries such as sort of Germany, France, Belgium, etc., in terms of where that business might come from. So in Amsterdam, very much a sort of different story to Washington, and then we come to London. So of course, London should be, in fact, the sort of the easiest location because it's home turf for the majority of us probably on this webinar today. But I think it's fair to say that the lack of clarity from the government in all regards is really stifling plans. And it's good to see sort of Greg's approach in terms of what Plaza and company are doing. My personal feeling is that it seems to me as if a majority of hotels will reopen their doors in September. I get a sense probably that's a different landscape probably in terms of some of the the established country house operators who will obviously want to sort of capitalise on what's happening from with us, our inability I should say to travel. But again, picking up on Ronnie's point, the sort of the quarantine is an absolute disaster, and I think I can only presume that the government will see sense and release the idea of that quarantine from the end of this month. Our plan will be following a phased approach, along similar lines as mentioned. With Sea Containers having a great location on the Thames, there's already, we can see even just in the past few weeks, an increase in footfall. So whilst again, the financials don't necessarily make sense for us just to open the restaurant, the view is that with furlough giving us much more flexibility with our teams, our view is that we will look to open the restaurant as soon as possible. We have outside space, so I suppose that technically is the nearest thing we can describe as a pub garden if we have to sort of look at other comparisons. And the restaurant, all the doors open up to give you a really great view. We're taking a view on when the hotel should open, but part of me thinks that I would want to be ahead of a September opening, because with all of those hotels suddenly saying we're going to open in September, you can just imagine the amount of sort of messages that your email messages you're going to get with reopening rates and reopening strategies. So I think there is a point around trying to sort of get ahead of the noise instead of getting drowned. But again, it's going to be very much phased. Obviously with our approach to obviously housekeeping, it means on paper that it feels like we're opening up more bedrooms than we actually are. But obviously to ensure the level of cleaning and give comfort to our guests, we will actually obviously have less rooms physically available for sale than we'd think. We're taking a phased approach in terms of bars, restaurants, as I mentioned. I think events were going to be towards the end of the year. I think credit to certainly the general managers working for me. I think it's great to see that a business such as hotels, where you wouldn't expect anyone to be in a position to work from home, and have managed to do so. And our teams have done an amazing job in terms of actually keeping that regular communication. To some degree, we're also thinking that actually when we reopen the hotels, we think that from a practical point of view that there are actually departments and teams that we will continue to allow to work remotely because it has actually worked. And I don't think any of us probably would have thought that would be the case before. So a couple of final thoughts, because I'm conscious of time and handing back to Danny for Q&A. I think we do need to consider new revenue lines. Those revenue lines may not necessarily be the most profitable ones, but I believe that they're ones that will actually reconnect our guests with the hotels. I think we do need to look at, and I know most people will be thinking about this, but we really need to look at how we operate our hotels differently. And that's not just reducing headcount, but I think, most of our hotels still operate with the same org charts, structure that they've been there for 50 odd years. So I think it's a case of actually, we need to modernize how we operate our hotels. And this is the opportunity. our younger teams don't want to do the same job week in, week out. So we should really consider that. I think when we talk about risk assessments, that's a critical part of what we do, but we also need to think about actually what does that look like from a guest journey point of view. So we've really been looking at that and sort of picking up on earlier points, looking at how we can embrace technology. So I hope that was useful. Greg, Ronnie, and I didn't sort of practice in advance, but hopefully the sort of different approaches and presentations give you a sort of sense of how we will reopen our properties and come back better than we were before. Thanks, Danny.
Thank you so much, David. That's really, really interesting. So just we've got quite a few questions here. I'm going to start off with two for Greg. There's a question, Greg, from Drew Brown about the UK hospitality draft risk assessment, and have you had sight of it, and do you have any advice on that, Greg?
Yeah, Danny, we have. I mean, first of all, going back to what Ronnie said, I really do think Kate and the UK hospitality team have done a sterling job with us and really stepped up to the mark, to be honest. We try to engage as much as we can with the document to support them when they've been canvassing. But I think as well as the risk assessments, all the work going around the financing structures of hotels and how hotels are funded, and, you know, what I'd say about testing and performance testing, with, you know, what government needs to do, that's really been addressed as well. So I thank her for that. But basically, yeah, positioning hospitality for an optimum recovery. You know, it's a good solid document to start from. So if anybody has not started that planning, for sure it's available on the UK hospitality website to start looking at and downloading. It looks at three main areas. One, a phased approach to reopening, which you probably saw a little bit in my presentation. The continued support whilst the business is closed regarding furloughs, rents and financing, like I just mentioned. And three, the industry developed not operational risk assessments, which is an area where you'll be able to go in and download and start getting a framework of where and how you can start to work from. But it does talk about the understanding of the government's secure stance on COVID-19, the relevant advice and sections below, from hotels, restaurants, pubs, nightclubs, amusement parks, and it gives you, an opportunity to complete your own risk assessment for your own business. So it's just a methodical approach just to get through and read and work through. So yeah. Thank you.
And just picking up, we've had a couple of questions for you, Greg, about, you mentioned your phased opening.
Yeah.
What's the decision basis for your phased opening? At what point are you going to move into the different phases?
Well, I think, whilst I've said, I think we've got two ones. One is the portfolio of how we implement hotels back into the portfolio. David said, we've got Westminster Bridge, County Hall, Waterloo, Riverbank, over 2,500 rooms on the South Bank. So with one opportunity, we do have a little bit of an opportunity there to see supply and demand, for that area coming into it. So we are very much going on the phase out. With 3 months, we've got no business on our books. Okay, Q4 is holding reasonably well in our M&E diaries, which gives us a little bit of confidence. However, for sure, it's dynamic. You have to be very flexible to try and maintain that business in Q4. So there's a bit of it, I'm sure you all are, but we have to be easy to do work with to maintain that business. But what we are seeing, the tacticals we're doing, as we've got nothing, we're dealing with as we would in a new launch. We're going out very tactically, seeing what the demand is like, measuring all of the search engine optimization, how people are looking for our hotels. And, the good news, what David was saying, the activity in people looking and now Googling, are hotels open in London or in the provinces, is increasing in all of my data. So that gives us some degree of confidence. But as and where it goes, it's very much once we see the demand increasing, we can then open and open. And the hotels which have base inventory, and hotels where we're talking, we've got air crews, still some NHS business if they need it, government business, project government business, that gives us a base to open a property. And going back to what Ronnie says, every one of our hotels has done the minimum break even. And some properties, Danny, we know we can operate a business at 12% occupancy and break even. Are we happy to open up at break even? We are, because I think when you're showing the confidence that the business is opening, it starts increasing the demand of it. And obviously it keeps those teams busy and operational.
That's really interesting. Ronny, we've got a few people listening in who have spas. So there's been a bit of interest in spas, and the guidelines seem to be far more woolly around spas. Have you got any thoughts or advice around this area?
I'm gonna answer this twofold. I'm taking a line David Taylor told me this morning. I'm a generalist and not an expert. So I think that's a real good line. So I'm certainly not an expert on it, but we have experts around us, and it is true that unfortunately the rules and regulations around spas are not yet as clear and published as we all wish they would be. On the other side, what we kind of like hearing and what kind of the industry, obviously the leisure and spa industry themselves, which are themselves a very big industry, kind of seem to be wanting to achieve is that they will be open around the same time. And the discussion we had around in the spa piece, it's really the relationship between the therapist and the client. How do you protect each other? And while we kind of like we're hearing that PPE is a topic in there, and that the customer certainly, as well as the therapists, would like to wear potential face masks, that working with gloves might not be the ideal in this field. But if you take the proper hygiene measurements, this whole idea about obviously disinfecting before and disinfecting yourself is really what seems to be a lot of driving these discussions. So we are very hopeful that we'll be able to open our spas ourselves. Obviously, health clubs, their social distancing is going to be a big piece. So we are working in all our leisure facilities on spreading out equipment, turning it back to back rather than next to each other, taking some equipment out to create that space. But we see this fairly positive and not necessarily negative, looking at increasing hours, letting people spread up over a longer period of time. We have a large spa operations throughout the UK. Our Sheraton Hotel in Edinburgh with Spa One is probably one of the biggest spas we have in the UK, period. And it is a big topic. We think it's potentially a great USP to have if you are in a leisure facility, and people will, as I mentioned before, want to come to your hotels. So we will continue lobbying it. I know the industry itself is lobbying for having clarity and answering for it. I hope that answers the question for the moment.
Thank you so much, Ronny. It's been really interesting. All three of you have mentioned digital solutions within your talks. I'm actually going to bring in here Chris Horn from Gold Key Media, who they're good supporters of the MIs, because you've done a lot of work, Chris, on this digital side of things.
Yes, thanks, Danny. Good morning, everybody. Well, good afternoon, just about. Yeah, Gold Key Media has created a digital media platform that's been operational now for around about 4 years. But whilst we're in the mode of removing a lot of collateral from guest rooms, I think the digital media platform will come into its own until those times return when we can put magazines and newspapers back into these environments. So the digital media platform that we've got available to you now really allows you to give your guests international newspapers and magazines, but also there's a children's section, a book section, videos, etc. But it also allows you as an individual property to put in your menus, your links to your spas, your gym facilities, or any other detail that you want to make the guest aware during their stay. And it's very intuitive. It recognizes where that guest is originated from, country of origin, but it also it allows them to access the platform without passwords. It's simply a QR code link that you can promote either on their key card or in room somehow, but we're having stickers made for mirrors and things like that. But basically what we want you to do really is to make the platform appear as if it is your own platform, not a third party's platform, that it's been created by you as an individual property. And we have no desire to engage with your guest directly, so we're not capturing their data. It's you entertaining your guest while they're staying at your property.
Fantastic, thank you so much. I'm going to ask David a couple of really quick fire questions here. David, face masks or no face masks?
Face masks, Danny.
Single-use plastic being reintroduced back into bathrooms rather than dispensers?
Good question. We're still debating it. If I'm being very honest with you, we are debating it. We're not there.
Okay. Gloves or no gloves?
Depending on where you are, gloves.
Okay. This one's probably more for Greg and Ronnie. There's been a few questions. Stuart Barry from Grosvenor House, you all represent hotels on the South Bank. How will you ensure we all hold rates in our respective markets and it doesn't become a race to the bottom?
It's a very good question. Now, for us, we've very much got a 3-month strategy in place. As I said to you, Q4 is critical for us, but what's on book and what we can see, which is happening in South Bank, is going to be very much UK domestic business. And to get that, it's got to be tactical. I actually think London, as much as I want it to be a premium destination, I think you've hit it on the nail already. I really think the provinces are going to lead on this one, especially during the summer. So we have to go out with a value-added promotion, especially when you've got 2,500 rooms on the South Bank. So I think all of ours are going out on closed tactical campaigns, not on bar rating. And with that in mind, it's very much about protecting Q4 and Q1 of next year for us. And really, it's like what we said, we just do not know what the impact of July and August is going to be like in London. So we're just doing whatever we can to get business in our inventory.
Ronnie, have you got anything to say on that one?
I'm always accused to be very pragmatic about these things. I think reality is, even if we have all the intention to keep the rates where they were, reality will prove that that's not going to be possible. Reality will prove that COVID-19 is the start of something we all hate, which is leading into a slight recession. There will be a lot of pressure from businesses coming to bring down rates. And I mentioned before, 51% of the business travelers saying already they will not travel. So there's a lot of inventory out there, and a lot of inventory, and depending on the various hotels and ownerships and various deals and how the hotels are financed, pressures will lead eventually that some rates will fall. I don't want to give you any illusion that I think there's a possibility to hold this. I think that's unrealistic. And when you look at any of the previous crises, from September 11, from SARS, from swine flu, whatever it was, we all swore always, let's try not to give in on rates. But at the end of the day, and I think if we are all honest, if the big special corporate, the money bringer stands in front of you and says, hey, you know what, I have a better deal across the street, I want to have this rate, and that this is an account which gives you 1,000, 2,000 room nights and might be representing 7-8% of your inventory, you'll cave in. I hate to say it, and I hope we all have the discipline to, and it's really a discipline question. We all have the discipline to holding on and justifying our rates with the great service and the great work we do. We will have increased cost. This new world will not be cheap. We will have less people in our banqueting. we will need to have additional cleaning. So it is discipline. It's the discipline of all of us to try to hold rate. I will certainly, and since I know Stuart very well, since he's part of the Marriott group, I will hold the general managers very much accountable to holding their rates. Thanks for the question. And then hopefully if we all do this, holding the general managers accountable for it, will hopefully be not having such a big fall.
Ronnie, that's why I named him as having said the question, just for you.
Danny, there's one thing though, and coming back to what Ronnie says, you know, every company is in the same position we are. You know, globally, you know, they have all been impacted. Every single client coming to us at the moment, customers may be different. You know, the general domestic customer may be different, but everybody from the corporates we are seeing, and I don't really want to talk too much about it, be it an airline, be it a major blue chip company, are all coming to us and saying, we need rate reduction.
Okay, Greg, I'm going to ask you a very practical question now. If someone fails a temperature check, how do you deal with it?
Right, it came back to an employee or a guest?
There's been about 5 questions, all saying if anybody fails it.
This is what I said. It's there's no legislation on it here, and it's very loose in Europe. You know, it's bigger in Israel of where we deal with it. If you've got a temperature in Israel, you know, you don't come into the facility, and you shouldn't leave your house. I think making it, knowing that you have this facility and marketing it will automatically make people check, in all honesty. And I think the benefit of it is coming more from a team member point of view, where we will have to take consideration, we will have to stipulate it as part of our terms and conditions of employment during this process, but you will be temperature checked, you know, and telling that message to the customer that our team are checked on entry to work. From a guest point of view, it's all about house rules. If there's no legislation coming out about it, you can stipulate within the reason of law and equality who comes within your property. You know, so at the time of booking, if you're saying that, you know, you maintain this A, B, or C temperature, we will have the right to refuse you entry. I'm saying we're not there yet, but this is the advice we're being given.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to ask you each one final question, the same question. If you had one bit of advice to give someone opening a UK hotel now, what would it be? David, I'm going to start off with you.
Be bold, think long term, because if you didn't do that, we'd all be closed forever.
Ronnie, your advice?
I think if you open your hotel, do it with conviction, be positive, and be willing to really you know, run for it, run with your whole energy. I personally look forward to become a hotelier again and be really out there with customers and helping and serving and all those good stuff, get away from reporting and statistics, but really doing what this business is all about, is connecting with people and they wanting to come to you, stay with you because you're good. And I think that would be my advice, be good.
Thank you. Greg?
You know, for sure this has been a reset for all of us, Danny, so both positive and negative. You know, it really has made us look where we're at. And correlating with what the other two said, it's keeping a calm strategic head, you know, and I think throughout all of this, the pressure points on my team and what I've witnessed have been unprecedented. And I know that term is used a lot, but I tell you what, keeping a cool, calm strategic head has, you know, led us where we are now.
Well, on behalf of the Mastery and Holders, Ronnie, Greg, David, thank you so much. The comments coming through on how interesting this session has been fantastic. So really appreciate it. Stay safe, everybody, and looking forward to seeing you on the 23rd of June for Kate Nichols' one. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.